You're not here by mistake. Something ancient and quiet within you has brought you to this very moment, to this exact video. And by the time you reach the end, a part of you will begin to grasp why. Perhaps lately you felt overwhelmed, as though life has spiraled into chaos, tangled in uncertainty, confusion, and challenges that seem void of reason. But what if I told you that all of this may be the most powerful indication that you're on the edge of the most meaningful, beautiful, and transformational chapter of your entire life? What many fail to see is that the universe rarely shouts without first whispering. It begins with soft nudges, quiet signs, subtle shifts, messages designed to awaken you before the storm of change fully arrives. The real tragedy is not in the chaos, but in how most dismiss these sacred cues as mere misfortune, bad luck, or coincidence, and give up just moments before their breakthrough. But not you. You're here now. That alone means you're beginning to listen, to see. And in this video, I'll take you through 7 of the most profound signs that your life is undergoing a massive transformation. If you resonate with even just a few of them, prepare yourself. A new reality is already unfolding beneath your feet. Let's begin. Sign 1. You're starting to question everything you once believed. If you've recently found yourself contemplating your values, your goals, your beliefs, or even the very purpose of your life, it isn't random. Something inside you is awakening. A quiet unraveling is taking place. The once sturdy pillars of your inner world, the thoughts, the systems, the convictions that used to guide you, are beginning to crack. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is sacred. It means you're awakening. The universe is gently pushing you to reevaluate what you've long accepted as truth. It's inviting you to pull back the veil and see the illusion behind the life you once lived without question. This isn't a crisis. This is rebirth. A dismantling of false identities, illusions, roles you've been forced to play. This is the universe calling you to something greater than you've ever known. This shift is vital for your evolution. It's life beckoning you to stretch your mind beyond the edges of what once felt safe. Those deeper questions. Who am I, really? What do I desire beyond fear? Is my life honoring the truth of my soul? They aren't just fleeting curiosities. They are thresholds. Once crossed, there's no going back. The familiar begins to dissolve. That sense of certainty fades. But this isn't you losing your way, this is you finding it. It's not a fall. It's a return. A return to your essence. The chaos. That's not destruction. That's the beginning of creation. It's the crumbling of the false self so that the authentic one can emerge. It's the universe clearing the stage, preparing you for the role you were born to play. As the old falls away, what's left behind is raw, real, honest, but above all, free. This questioning is the genesis of your transformation. Not a detour, not confusion, not failure. It's a sacred process. It's the beginning of clarity. You're not breaking down. You're breaking through. And this shift affects more than just your thoughts. It begins to echo through every aspect of your being. Your relationships, habits, your entire lifestyle. People who no longer resonate with your vibration slowly disappear. Places and patterns that once brought comfort now feel confining. That's because you're shedding what no longer aligns with your new frequency. Consider this an internal cleanse, a kind of spiritual detox. You're becoming selective, unconsciously filtering out what depletes you and drawing in what nourishes your evolution. This often requires letting go. Letting go of attachments that once felt like home but were never your truth. Comfort zones. Familiar suffering. The illusion of control. It's hard, yes, because those things may have defined you for years. But they're not you. They were tools, temporary identities for a phase that's now ending. What follows is the magic. After the chaos, a new version of you begins to surface. One that is stronger, wiser, lighter, and clearer. You'll feel it first as a quiet shift, a blend of fear and anticipation, like something enormous is about to begin. That feeling. That's not anxiety. That's intuition. That's your soul sensing its own expansion. It's the moment when old limits start to dissolve. Dreams return. Energy flows. Purpose ignites. It's as if you've been tending to a garden of weeds, and now, something finally begins to bloom. And here's where true magic begins to unfold. The answers you've been seeking begin to arrive, but not in the way you might expect. They come in whispers, in synchronicities. A sentence from a stranger. A book you stumble upon. A dream. A feeling. A knowing. These signs aren't coincidences. They are coordinates. Your soul knows the way, even if your mind doesn't. Even in the absence of complete answers, you'll feel it. You're on the right path. Because questioning is transformation. It's not confusion. It's wisdom in motion. This inner revolution doesn't stop at your thoughts. It begins reshaping your emotional landscape too. You'll start noticing a growing detachment from your past, not out of bitterness, but with a strange sense of peace. The places, people, and routines that once meant everything may now feel distant. Almost like they belong to a different life. And in a way, they do. Sign 2. You feel a gentle, growing disconnection from the life you used to live. This sign doesn't arrive with fireworks or drama. It creeps in softly, like a tide quietly pulling back from the shore. One day, you wake up and realize that the things which once excited or defined you, your hobbies, your social circles, your daily rituals, no longer ignite that same spark. It's not that something outside has changed. It's that you have. Your soul is moving forward, and the old you can't come with you. That restaurant you used to love, that group of friends that once felt like family, even that career you thought you'd follow forever, they start to feel like echoes. Not because they're inherently wrong, but because they've served their purpose. Their time in your story has passed. This emotional shift can feel confusing, even unsettling. You might question whether you're becoming numb or broken. But in truth, you're becoming aware. Your soul is gently realigning. It's releasing what no longer supports your expansion, so it can make room for something deeper, something more true. You're not losing passion. You're outgrowing what no longer fits. This isn't about abandoning your past, it's about honoring your present. You're evolving, and evolution always requires space. You might notice that conversations which once intrigued you now feel empty, or that routines you once relied on now feel like cages. Even people you once loved deeply may now feel strangely unfamiliar. That's because the emotional resonance between you and those elements has shifted. Your frequency is rising. And when that happens, anything that doesn't match that frequency will begin to fade. This detachment is sacred. It's not a rejection of your past, it's preparation for your future. Think of it like a tree in autumn. The leaves fall not because the tree is dying, but because it's making way for something new to grow. It's a shedding of identity, a shedding of who you thought you had to be so that you can become who you really are. You may find yourself unsure of where you're heading. The future may look blank, undefined. But here's the secret: blank pages are powerful. They're where new stories begin. You're in that space now. The void before the vision. The stillness before the becoming. It might feel lonely at first. And that loneliness, it's not failure. It's transition. It's sacred space being carved out inside you. Space that's no longer filled with what once was, but ready for what's coming. And what's coming? That's the beautiful part. Your soul already knows. You're moving toward people who will see you as you truly are, not who you were. Toward a path that reflects your current truth, not your past roles. And toward a life that no longer depends on the world's approval, but is fueled by your own alignment. This period of disconnection is not the end. It's the doorway. It's where the unraveling begins, yes, but also where your rebirth takes root. Your old self, the one who lived on autopilot, who followed the crowd, who accepted limitations without question, is beginning to dissolve. You're entering the unknown not because you're lost, but because you've stopped pretending that the old map still applies. The path ahead requires courage, yes. It demands trust. It demands a willingness to let go of the things you thought would always matter. But in return, you gain something extraordinary. You gain your truth. This is the beginning of a life that no longer asks you to fit in, but invites you to belong. Not to society, not to roles, not to projections, but to your own soul. So if you feel yourself drifting, if the people, places, and passions of your past life no longer feel like home, know this. You're not falling apart. You're falling into alignment. You're not losing yourself. You're finally meeting who you truly are. The world you once knew is fading. Not because it was wrong, but because it's time. Time for your rebirth. Sign 3. You start questioning what you once believed was important. Suddenly, what used to feel urgent no longer moves you. The desires that once pulled at your soul, status, recognition, accumulation, perfection, begin to lose their grip. It's as if the veil has lifted and you're seeing the world through entirely new eyes. And through those eyes, the truth becomes clearer. The things you were chasing were never truly yours. Not because they didn't matter to someone, but because they didn't matter to you. There's an inner shift occurring, subtle yet profound. It whispers, you were never here to follow someone else's path. You were here to discover your own. What once felt like goals now feel like distractions. The timeline you were running against? It was never real. The expectations you carried? Not your own. And now you feel it. A pull away from the noise. A longing for something deeper. This moment, this revelation, it's not about abandoning ambition. It's about realigning it. You start to realize that fulfillment doesn't come from what you acquire, but from what you become. The need for constant validation fades. In its place rises a desire for authenticity, for a life lived in alignment with your soul rather than in reaction to the world. This questioning of what matters is not a sign of failure, it's a signal of evolution. You're no longer willing to pretend, no longer willing to perform, no longer willing to trade peace for approval. Instead, you begin to ask, what makes me feel alive? What fills me with purpose? What kind of life would I live if I weren't afraid? These questions open doorways, and through those doorways, new desires begin to emerge. You find yourself craving simplicity, meaningful conversations, experiences that nourish, not impress, connections that feel real, a lifestyle that reflects who you are, not what you think you should be. It's not about having less. It's about needing less noise, less comparison, less pretending, and more space, space for stillness, space for truth, space for the self you've been neglecting to fully hear. As this inner revolution deepens, you begin to look inward more than outward. Answers that used to come from the opinions of others now arise from a quieter place. You stop asking for permission to change. You stop needing to justify your evolution. You simply begin to live differently. At first, it may be disorienting. It might even feel like grief. The identity you worked so hard to maintain is fading. But in its place, something sacred is being born. A version of you that no longer conforms, but creates. No longer seeks, but knows. This is the moment you understand. Your worth has nothing to do with what you've achieved and everything to do with who you are becoming. You begin choosing differently. Not because someone told you to, but because your soul demands it. The choices you make now are less about what looks good and more about what feels good, what feels whole, what feels true. You may find yourself waking up earlier, spending more time in nature, letting silence take the place of distractions. You may start writing again, or meditating, or creating, or simply doing less, but feeling more. And yes, this transformation may come with solitude, because not everyone around you will understand. You may outgrow conversations, environments, even relationships. But you'll also begin to attract something new, people who see you, people who mirror back the parts of you that are rising, people who speak your new language, not of fear and pretending, but of truth and alignment. It's a sacred exchange, a shedding of one skin for another. You're not just changing your interests, you're changing your essence. And once that change begins, there's no turning back. Because when you've tasted what it's like to live in alignment, you can never again be satisfied with compromise. This awakening may not be loud. It may not be celebrated. But it is real. And it is yours. So if you're beginning to feel disconnected from the things you once chased, if the goals you used to cling to no longer light your path, don't panic. Pause. Breathe. And listen. What you're feeling is the soul reclaiming its voice. It's not confusion. It's clarity emerging from the silence. You're stepping into a version of life that was always waiting for you, the one where meaning replaces obligation and truth becomes your compass. This is the moment where your real life begins. Sign 4. Your intuition grows louder than ever before. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when something deep within you begins to guide you more clearly than the world around you ever could. A knowing, a whisper, an unexplainable pull. It isn't loud or dramatic. In fact, it often arrives in stillness. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. This inner voice, that sacred gut feeling, that silent push or pull, it begins to take the lead. Where you once relied solely on logic or others' advice, you now start to sense a deeper compass within. One that doesn't need explanation. One that simply knows. It's not about predicting the future. It's about aligning with the present. Intuition speaks in symbols, in feelings, in sudden clarity. It shows up as a nudge that says, turn here. Or as a tension that tells you, this isn't for you. It may speak through the calm you feel around certain people or the anxiety that arises when you stray from your path. And more, you begin to listen. Because you've realized, that voice was always right. Even when it went against reason. Even when it made no sense to anyone else. This is a sacred turning point in your evolution. It marks the moment you begin to trust yourself. Not your fears. Not your conditioning. Not the external noise. But the quiet, steady truth within you. At first, this voice may seem fragile. But the more you honor it, the stronger it becomes. You start making decisions that may confuse others but feel like peace to you. You choose rest over hustle. Honesty over approval. Alignment over obligation. And in doing so, your path begins to unfold not by force, but by flow. This is the intelligence of the soul. Intuition doesn't need to convince you. It simply waits for you to become still enough to hear it. As you begin tuning in, the chaos of the world loses its grip. You stop being swayed by trends, opinions, and fear-based urgency. You stop needing constant validation, because your truth becomes louder than the world's noise. And in that stillness, clarity blooms. You begin to notice synchronicities. Events that once seemed random now connect like threads in a larger pattern. You meet the right people at the perfect time. You hear the exact words you needed in a book you weren't even planning to read. These aren't accidents. They are reflections of your growing alignment. Your outer world is beginning to mirror your inner shift. Because when you follow intuition, you walk the path designed for you. not for your ego but for your essence. And that path, it leads somewhere extraordinary. It leads home, to the self you abandoned when you first learned to silence your instincts, to the self who knew the truth long before the world told you what to believe. There's no formula to this awakening, no step-by-step plan. It's not linear. It unfolds as you do. But one thing is certain, as intuition takes the wheel, life becomes less about figuring things out and more about feeling your way forward. It's not about control anymore. It's about connection. Connection to your inner world, to your body, to the present moment. And from that space, decisions arise effortlessly. You stop second-guessing. You stop waiting. You start living. This is not just a spiritual idea, it's a lived experience. You feel safer in your own skin. You begin to recognize the energetic tone of truth. You know what peace feels like. And you honor it, even when it's inconvenient, even when it asks you to let go of things you once clung to, especially then. Because intuition doesn't just guide you toward what feels good, it leads you away from what no longer fits. And sometimes, the most powerful decision you'll make is to walk away. From a job, from a relationship, from a version of yourself that no longer resonates. This isn't running away. It's returning. Returning to the place inside you that was never confused, never lost, just waiting for you to stop ignoring it. So if your intuition is growing stronger, if you're feeling called to something and you don't yet understand what, it's not your mind losing clarity. It's your soul reclaiming command. Trust it, even when it scares you, especially then. Because that's how transformation begins, not with certainty, but with surrender. And when you surrender to that voice within, you're no longer following someone else's map. You're creating your own. Sign 5. You feel an undeniable pull toward personal growth. There comes a point where comfort is no longer enough, where surviving isn't satisfying, and even success, if it's not aligned, feels hollow. You look around at the life you've built, the routines you've followed, the identity you've worn, and suddenly, it all feels too small. Not because it's bad, but because you've outgrown it. It begins with a quiet hunger, a restlessness in your soul, a whisper that says, there is more, and it's time to become it. You're no longer content to stay where you are, not because you hate it, but because you know you're meant for something deeper, something truer. That hunger is the fire of personal evolution. You find yourself drawn to new ideas, new books, new ways of seeing the world. Conversations that challenge you now excite you. You begin to explore your shadow, not to punish yourself, but to understand the parts of you that have been waiting to be healed. You stop blaming the world and start looking within. This is the beginning of conscious growth. And once that process begins, nothing can stop it. You start seeking, not from lack, but from longing. A longing to become whole. To uncover who you are beneath the conditioning, the performance, the masks. You start to realize that the answers you've been looking for aren't out there. They're buried beneath the noise, in the quiet space of your own awareness. This is where transformation lives. It's not found in achieving more, but in becoming more aware, more intentional, more alive. And in that space of awareness, something powerful begins to shift. You stop settling. You stop making excuses for patterns that keep you small. You stop living for the weekend, for the approval, for the next distraction. Instead, you begin designing your life from the inside out. Maybe you enroll in a course, or pick up a book that changes the way you see reality. Maybe you start journaling, meditating, questioning your own mind. Maybe you sit in silence for the first time and actually listen. And what you hear surprises you. Because beneath all the noise, you're not broken. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're simply waking up. You begin to see that your growth is not about fixing something wrong, it's about unlocking something right. A truer version of yourself that's been buried under years of expectations, fear, and pretending. This kind of growth isn't always glamorous. It's often raw, uncomfortable, messy, but it's real. And real growth changes everything. You begin making choices that feel aligned, even if they scare you. You stop asking for permission to evolve. You understand now, your life is your responsibility. Your healing is your work. Your transformation is your gift, not just to yourself, but to the world. Because the more you grow, the more you begin to live from a place of integrity. A place where your thoughts, your words, and your actions reflect your truth. A place where you don't just survive, but thrive. And in that space, you no longer tolerate what drains you. Toxic habits, superficial conversations, relationships built on old versions of you, they all start to fall away. Not with anger, but with peace. Because you're no longer trying to prove yourself. You're simply trying to be yourself. You realize that growth is not linear. It doesn't follow a straight path. Some days, you'll feel like you've leapt forward. Others, like you've fallen back. But even the steps that feel like regression are part of the journey. There are no mistakes here. Only mirrors. Everything you encounter reflects something you are ready to see, heal, or become. And with each insight, you rise. With each breakthrough, you shed an old version of yourself and step into something more expansive. You become more patient, more conscious, more connected to the present moment. You begin living with depth, not chasing highs, but creating meaning, not avoiding discomfort, but growing through it. And that is real power. The kind of power that doesn't come from controlling life, but from understanding it, trusting it, moving with it. So if you feel that yearning inside you, a thirst to learn, to evolve, to break through everything that once defined you, honor it. That's not ambition. That's awakening. It's your higher self guiding you home, calling you to expand beyond the limits of your past, to shed everything false and step into everything true. This is the beginning of your becoming. And you don't need to rush it. You just need to answer it. Sign 6. You feel an intense need to release toxic relationships and energy-draining environments. There comes a moment in your awakening when you can no longer pretend. When the people, places, and habits that once seemed tolerable now feel suffocating. It's not because you've become bitter or arrogant. It's because your soul is no longer willing to dim itself just to keep the peace. You begin to see it clearly. What once felt like connection was often just attachment. What looked like loyalty was survival. And what felt like home was sometimes just familiarity, not safety. The blinders are falling away. And for the first time, you start choosing your energy over your history. The friendships that once revolved around shared wounds no longer feel nourishing. The relationships that required you to shrink or perform now feel unbearable. The environments that once blended into your life now feel foreign, even if they haven't changed. That's the power of growth. It reveals what you've been tolerating. And when that truth hits, it changes everything. You're no longer available for half versions of love. No longer willing to betray your peace just to avoid conflict. No longer interested in explaining your worth to those committed to misunderstanding you. This is a sacred reclamation. It's not about cutting people off in anger. It's about returning to yourself in love. It's about choosing boundaries over burnout, truth over people-pleasing, alignment over attachment. Some relationships are not meant to grow with you. And that doesn't make them bad. It simply means they were chapters, not the whole story. You're not abandoning anyone. You're honoring the self you're becoming. That version of you, the one you're stepping into, can't thrive in old energy. It needs room to breathe, room to rise, room to be. And that means clearing space, even if it hurts. You might grieve the loss of what once was. You might question yourself. But somewhere deeper, there's a knowing. You're not losing anything real. Because love that asks you to abandon yourself isn't love. It's fear in disguise. And now, you've had enough of that. You're done performing, pleasing, and shrinking. You're done staying in spaces that exhaust you, conversations that numb you, dynamics that confuse you. Your soul is demanding peace. Your heart is asking for depth. And your body is telling you the truth. It always has. Pay attention to how you feel around certain people. That tightness in your chest? That drained feeling after a conversation? That anxiety before showing up somewhere? Those aren't coincidences. They're messages. And now, you're finally listening. This isn't about walking away in resentment. It's about walking toward your wholeness. It's about creating relationships rooted in honesty, mutual growth, and real presence. Ones where you don't have to filter your truth. Where you don't have to earn love. Where being seen doesn't cost you your soul. Yes, it may be lonely at first. Yes, it may hurt. But that space you're clearing? It's sacred. It's making way for something greater. New connections. New energy. New beginnings. The kind that match your frequency, not your fear. Letting go isn't always a dramatic act. Sometimes, it's a quiet decision. A choice to stop returning to conversations that go nowhere. To stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand. To stop saying yes when your entire being is screaming no. You begin to notice that your peace is too expensive to trade for superficial validation. That your growth matters more than old attachments. That being alone is far more empowering than staying connected to what drains you. This is your rebirth. This is where you reclaim your time, your energy, your sacred space. The relationships you attract now will feel different. They won't demand that you shrink. They won't thrive on your insecurity. They'll feel safe, expansive, alive. These connections are built on resonance, not obligation, on truth, not projection. You're learning to love in a new way, not with desperation, but with discernment, not from need, but from fullness. And in doing so, you're rewriting the story of what you're available for. You are no longer a match for chaos. You are becoming a sanctuary, for yourself and for others who are also ready to live in alignment. So if you feel the urge to walk away, to create distance, to say goodbye, even without the perfect reason, listen. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Your soul is making space for the future that's trying to reach you. And it can't enter until you release what's blocking the door. Sign 7. You begin to detach from everything that no longer serves your becoming. There's a silence that falls over your life, not the absence of sound, but the absence of noise. The drama, the distraction, the constant striving, it begins to dissolve. Not all at once. Sometimes so slowly that you barely notice. But one day, you wake up and realize that what once held so much weight now feels light, or even irrelevant. The old triggers don't sting the same. The same arguments don't interest you. The familiar chaos no longer excites you. It's not that life has become easier, it's that you have become different. The fire you used to feed with conflict, urgency, and external validation has gone out. And in its place, a still flame burns quietly. Steady. Unshakable. This is detachment, not in the sense of giving up, but in the deepest sense of freedom. You're no longer clinging to what should be, who should stay, or how things should unfold. You're no longer trying to force outcomes. You're learning to let life breathe, to let things come and go, to trust the movement. You begin to see that most of the suffering wasn't in the experience, It was in the attachment. The belief that it had to be a certain way. The illusion that control was safety. But now, you're beginning to loosen your grip. Not because you don't care, but because you finally trust. You trust that what's meant for you will stay. You trust that what leaves is making room. You trust that your becoming requires space. This kind of detachment doesn't make you cold or distant. It actually makes you softer, more present, more alive. Because you're no longer in resistance. You stop needing to fix everything. You stop chasing people. You stop obsessing over timelines. You stop trying to win battles that were never meant for you. Instead, you show up, fully, without expectation, without armor, without needing life to prove anything. You find yourself feeling peace in the midst of uncertainty, feeling calm even when things don't go to plan. Because your peace no longer depends on the external, it lives within you. And when you find that center, something remarkable happens. You begin to draw in what truly matches your energy. The right people, the right opportunities, the right lessons. They appear, not because you chased them, but because you made room. Room by letting go. Room by trusting the flow. Room by honoring your own becoming more than the fear of what you might lose. And yes, there are moments of grief. There are moments where you look back and feel the echo of what used to be. You might question yourself. Wonder if you gave up too soon. If you're walking too far alone. But then you remember, peace doesn't lie. And you have never felt so deeply at peace. This phase is sacred. It's a quiet revolution. The shedding of layers that no longer resonate. The death of a version of you who once needed to control, to chase, to prove. And in that death, something more authentic begins to rise. Not a persona, but a presence. You. The real you. The one beneath the roles and reactions. The one who doesn't need to be anything other than what they are in this moment. The one who understands that healing is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. And from that wholeness, everything changes. Your choices shift. Your relationships transform. Your reality evolves. Because when you detach from what no longer aligns, you create the conditions for something miraculous. A life that actually reflects your truth. Not your trauma. Not your history. Your truth. That truth doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply is. And now, you're ready to live from that place. To show up unedited. To love without conditions. To grow without limits. To receive without resistance. This isn't the end of the journey. It's the deep exhale before the expansion. You've emptied enough to now begin filling with something new. Something real. Something that honors everything you've become. So if you feel detached, distant, less reactive, less defined by who you used to be, this is not your collapse. It's your alignment. And what comes next will be shaped by this space you've created, this sacred emptiness. It's not a void. It's a womb. The place where something beautiful begins to grow. Final. The great return to the self. There is a moment, after the crumbling, after the shedding, after the quiet breaking open, when something rises within you that words can barely describe. A stillness. A truth. A clarity that feels both unfamiliar and completely known. This is not the end of your transformation. It is your arrival. You've walked through confusion. You've sat with the unknown. You've questioned your identity, your purpose, your direction. You've outgrown versions of yourself you once thought were permanent. And now, you stand at the edge of a new becoming. You are not the same. And you know it. The fear still whispers sometimes. The doubt still circles the edges of your mind. But the difference now is that you don't believe them the same way. You don't follow them down the spiral. Because a deeper voice has emerged within you. One that says, you've come too far to forget who you are becoming. This voice isn't loud. It doesn't demand. It simply remains. And it reminds you, the person you were seeking? You're becoming them. Not by striving, but by remembering. Remembering the truth that was buried beneath layers of conditioning, expectation, and fear. The truth that you are already whole. That you always were. That your pain was not proof of your weakness, it was the soil for your awakening. You've learned to listen, not to the noise, but to your soul. You've learned to feel, not just pleasure but discomfort. Not just joy, but grief. Not just love, but longing. And in doing so, you've reclaimed the full spectrum of your humanity. You're no longer running from parts of yourself, you're integrating them. The shadow no longer scares you. The silence no longer overwhelms you. The unknown no longer paralyzes you. Because now, you see it all for what it really is, a mirror. An initiation. A sacred doorway back to your essence. This is not about becoming a better version of yourself. It's about remembering the version of you that existed before the world told you who to be. The version that was wild, pure, free. The version that knew rest was holy, that presence was power, and that alignment would always matter more than achievement. Now, you live slower, more intentionally. You take deeper breaths. You speak with more honesty. You stop needing to fill the space. You stop needing to be right. You stop needing to prove. You just are. And that is enough. You begin to notice beauty in places you once overlooked. A soft breeze through the window. A stranger's kind smile. A quiet morning with no obligations. You begin to understand that peace was never found in perfection, but in presence. And from that presence, you build. You build new relationships, not from trauma bonding or performance, but from resonance and truth. You build a life, not from pressure or competition, but from love and intention. You build dreams, not from fear of lack, but from faith in your abundance. And you do it all not with urgency, but with grace. Because now, you trust timing. You trust that what's meant for you will never require you to betray yourself to attain it. You trust that rest is not laziness, it is wisdom. You trust that your intuition is your most accurate GPS. You trust that love, real love, begins within. So when the world calls you to rush, to strive, to compare, to consume, you return to your center. You remember the path you've walked. You remember the pain you've alchemized. You remember the questions that brought you here. And you answer them, not with certainty, but with embodiment. You no longer seek transformation. You are transformation. You are living proof that healing is possible. That change is real. That awakening isn't a destination, it's a way of moving through life. And from this state, everything becomes sacred. The ordinary becomes miraculous. The mundane becomes magical. And every breath becomes an act of devotion. You've returned to yourself. And that changes everything. Because when you return to yourself, you return to life. You begin to dance again. To laugh from the gut. To cry without apology. To love without armor. To speak without rehearsal. You begin to live, not as a concept, but as a force. And that is where true power lives. Not in control, but in surrender. Not in becoming someone else, but in unbecoming everything you were never meant to be. This is the gift of awakening. And now it's yours. Honor it. Protect it. Celebrate it. Let it shape your days, your choices, your relationships, your dreams. Let it guide you. Let it crack you open again and again, because each time you will rise wiser, softer, stronger. This is not the end. This is the threshold. A new story is beginning. One written in your language. One shaped by your truth. One no longer driven by fear, but illuminated by love. So breathe deeply. Let this chapter unfold. And know this, the journey you've walked has not been in vain. Every detour, every breakdown, every question, it led you here. To this moment. To this version of you. And this version? This is who you were always meant to be.